All right. Well, thanks for joining us tonight. Thank you, Akshin, for doing that interview with me. And he's in the back room if you're with us. If you're watching online, he'd love to. I can tell you because I asked him, he'd love to get together with you. If you ever wanted to follow up, get to know him, ask some questions. He may be heading over to Presidential afterwards. We make that kind of a recent tradition of going there and just hanging out afterwards. And I think he may be able to join us there for a bit. You could catch up with him there as well. But we're grateful for him, not just the time he took to share that with us, but the work he's been doing here in Southwest Michigan, particularly through 3rd CRC and through the Reformed Church with refugees. So thank you, Akshin, for sharing with us. My name's Mitch. I'm the lead pastor here at Converge. We've been doing this just over a year now, which seems crazy. And my journey, too, you got to hear about Akshin's journey. My journey is kind of a meandering journey as well. And I want to take the time today to share a little bit more about that journey with each of you. Because some may just assume, hey, here's a pastor guy. He probably was born into a school where they sent toddlers to become pastors, and he just went right on down that path. But that wasn't the case for me. I actually grew up in a home that did have church backgrounds, but different church backgrounds. And so we went to church for a little bit when we were young, and then that kind of just dissipated. And I did like what a lot of other silly middle school and high school students do and make some dumb decisions along the way. And faith wasn't really a big part of my story growing up. And I went to college, and all of a sudden you have this kind of dramatic change in your life. I didn't know a single person that I went to college with, but I went to University of Michigan. And I grew up in a very small town, and it's literally just an intersection in a small country school. And so I didn't really know many people of any difference at all, whether it's ethnic or religious or anything. I mean, we were kind of all just blue-collar folk in the middle of nowhere, and we all kind of had this Christian background. Not to say everybody was deeply involved in church, but it was just kind of the thing that people would at least go to church on holidays. That was kind of the world I grew up in. And then I went to University of Michigan, and all of a sudden, in an instant, because I didn't know anybody and you're trying to make friends, it seemed like everybody I met had this wild, different story that wasn't small town Mitch. In fact, my roommates, one was from his father. They were citizens, but he worked for the DEA, and they were originally from Argentina. His dad had seen some terrible, terrible things working for the DEA and basically said, there's no God. And my roommate, my friend, just kind of grew up in these very atheistic roots. I had another friend whose one parent was from Jamaica and one had an Irish Catholic background. So there's this kind of Irish Catholic, Rastafarian kind of hybrid of faith going on. I had a friend who was a Hindu down the hall. I had a friend who was Jewish in another dorm. All of a sudden, I'm like, wait a second. I have never even considered once in my life that there could be people who actually do other religions outside of just stuff you hear, in magazines or whatever. And so I hit this kind of critical moment where all of a sudden, two big questions were really coming to the forefront of my mind. And one, which was a bit disturbing to me, was, am I a Christian simply because my parents were? And then the second one was, what about all of these other religions? Can there be only one true religion, or are all of them good, or what? And so I started this journey pretty sincerely. Like I said, faith wasn't a huge part of my life growing up, so I went into it pretty authentically, just saying, hey, I need to know what these answers are, because the reality is there are huge implications. There are huge implications. If I'm wrong about being a Christian, I want to figure out what the right one is. If everything kind of goes and nothing really matters, well, maybe I'm just not going to take faith that serious and go do the things I was planning on doing already in college. I really wanted to know this. And so I started that investigative process where it started by just asking a lot of questions to the friends I'd made around there. And that was super helpful, just hearing their perspective. I started reading different books that kind of talk about the different religions. I started taking I probably took just about every religion class they offered over the course of my time there. And it went from, really, really like specific Asian religions all the way to, the big ones like Christianity and Hinduism and Buddhism. Even took a class on Mormonism. I took a class on messianic movements, on cults. They have a lot. What's interesting is you think, wow, that's a pretty good broad background, but you still have to consider most of the people teaching these aren't actually followers of these faiths. The guy who taught my Christian course went to Dallas Seminary, which is a great seminary, but he was a self-pronounced atheist. So you had this really wide view of the faith and trying to sort that out. And basically, when I started investigating, we're going to do this process together a little bit today. We're not going to spend a lot of time here, but we're going to do this a little bit. When I started investigating these religions, one thing started becoming very apparent. But I want to jump in and start looking at some of these other religions as well. Now, I will say this. When you ask a question like, can there be only one true religion? You have two parts to this question. And one is just the head. One is that very reasonable, logical, you're just trying to get to the heart of the answer. You just need to know what makes sense. That's the head part of this question. The other part of the question, I'd call it the heart part of the question. Because whatever the answer is, because of those implications, because of the people it impacts, there's a relational dynamic that's going to change to some extent with all the people you know. And so that's actually the heavier part of this question that we're going to spend more time talking about today. And I think it actually lends itself well to starting here, because I want this to be a space where you feel, no matter your background, you could have been grown up in the church and you're all in, you get this. It's just a safe place for you to kind of go through some of your doubts or skepticisms. If you're watching or attending and you've never really given this strong consideration, we want this to be a place where you can do that safely. And so I start here because I want to be clear wherever our conclusions are, and I'm sure you know this is a church where our conclusions are going to be, right? I want you to understand that we know that there's some really hard social, relational, emotional implications to that, and we want to acknowledge that, and we want to talk about that in a bit, and what our posture should be if you're a Jesus follower because of that. So we're going to jump in here, but we're going to start with the head, investigating kind of just more of these claims, the religions themselves. And that first one, the first thing we want to do is kind of start wrestling with what are the kind of some of the basics of these main religions, and we're only going to really hit some of the big ones. I mean, like I said, there are a lot of religions, and really, by definition of religion, there's probably a lot of worldviews that we wouldn't call religion in an organized way that are still religions. They're ways to think about the world and the way you live your life that shape your spiritual and your practical, the way you live your life practically. And so we can't hit possibly in all of them, but we're going to take kind of these big ones just for sake of example so you can see how we get to kind of our final conclusion here. And the first thing that I want to draw your attention to is some of these theistic claims of some of these big ones. When I say theistic, what do they believe about God? And if you're in America, you probably have most of your familiarity with the Judaic or the Abrahamic religions, Islam, Judaism, Christianity. And these religions believe very firmly in a strong monotheistic view, meaning that there is only one God and one God alone, one supreme, powerful creator responsible for everything. And there are no other gods. There's just none. Even when you see other gods mentioned in their books, the Jewish book, the Quran, the Christian, the Bible, what happens is they talk about people having other gods, but they don't actually acknowledge that they're gods. They're saying they're worshiping other gods, but they're not advocating saying they're actually gods, they're idols or whatever. They believe in one God exclusively. Hinduism, for example, has a supreme God, but also a pantheon of many other gods that kind of help out. This would be, if you're not familiar with Hinduism, more like what you would think in the Greek mythology, where you have Zeus as the supreme, and then you have all these other helper gods that are a part of this. And then you have Buddhism, for example, doesn't believe in God. It's an atheistic religion. Go one step further, cosmological kind of perspective. What does these religions say about the world and about the origins and universe? You have the Eastern religions, Muslim, Hinduism, Buddhism, believe in the cyclical nature of life. Not a real distinct origin story, just a cycle that keeps turning and turning and turning in this constant perpetual rebirth cycle, reincarnation. You have the Abrahamic religions, again, where they believe in a very distinct beginning to the world, and you have a very physical human birth in just one, and a very real death, and then the after is this very physical afterlife. You remain with your body there. And then, of course, you have more the atheistic view. It's just when we're done, we're done. That's it. It's a product of science, and then we die, and that's it. The one that I want to spend this last, and let me disclaim this a bit, because your eyes might be rolling back in your head, and you're just like, Mitch, what the heck are you saying right now? And these are a lot of big words, and I don't really care. But I want you to hear this piece of it. Is there's a lot we could, and I'm really, really oversimplifying this. And I don't want to do that out of disrespect. I'm doing this because we have 25, 30 minutes to do this. And I actually want you to get together with me, or you get together with Agsheen, or somebody you maybe know, and have these conversations and dig in deeper and read the books and go through the process like you heard I did, like Agsheen did. But this last part is a really important one, and it's how these religions view atonement. How do you kind of deal with the wrong you've done in life and then get to kind of this better place, right? How do you, what's their views on that? And you see in Islam and Judaism, atonement in similar ways comes through worship and focus on God, right? But it has to do with this devotion and this obedience. And at the end of the day, what happens is, were you good enough as a follower to be accepted in? It was wholly it's wholly at the mercy in the end, or wholly in the hands of God's mercy in the end. Whether he says, yep, I'm going to have mercy on you, or you're going to pay for the consequences of these actions, right? So this is kind of that view. It's more of a works-based model. This is the cosmic scales, as you've heard. Do more good than bad, that sort of thing. This is how systems are set up currently. Now, Judaism had sacrifices and things. They don't do that anymore, but that was one way they used to deal with it as well. Hinduism and Buddhism believes, and you guys have probably heard this kind of karma atonement, right? Like if you do good things, more good things happen to you. If you do bad things, more bad things are coming your way. And it's almost this process of penance, right? You do something wrong and more bad things happen. You kind of have to grind through that and earn your way out of it. In a lot of ways, it is this kind of works-based model as well. And ultimately, you're trying to improve your situation in these cycles of rebirth, where if you do well enough, then you get a better rebirth in the next cycle, and hope ultimately get up to this Brahmin status in the Hindu world, where you can maybe reach enlightenment and break out of the cycle and reach this state of enlightenment, free from the soul body. What's different about this is that it's claiming a very spiritual ending. There's no physical body. There's this state of nothingness. This is very different than the Christian or Jewish or Muslim claims about the afterlife. And in Buddhism, it's purely a season of nothingness, of complete nirvana, as they call it. Jesus had a very different claim, and he said this in John 14, 1 through 7. He says, "Do not let your hearts be troubled. You believe in God. Believe also in me. My Father's house has many rooms. If that were not so, would I have told you that I'm going there to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I'll come back and take you to be with me, that you also may be where I am. You know the way to the place where I'm going." Thomas said to him, "Lord, we don't know where you're going, so how can we know the way?" Jesus answered, "I am the way and the truth and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. If you really know me, you will know my Father as well. From now on, you do know him and have seen him." This is a really, really important part of the Christian Bible because Jesus, he's talking about the future. He's talking about the end life. There are these specific claims about what that end life is going to be and what it isn't. He's also saying, I'm going to go pave the way for you with my Father. So he's making some interesting claims as we think about monotheism. This is what Agshin was talking about, the difficulties with the Trinity in Judaism and Islam in particularly. But then he goes on to say, you have seen the Father. If you've seen me, you've seen the Father. This is a claim of deity. He is saying, I and the Father are one. We are God. And nobody goes to heaven. Nobody goes beyond this life except through me. This is a very bold and distinct claim. And not only that, the claim that makes Christianity so unique is that it's not based on moral efforts or work. There is certainly a moral code involved in Christianity, no doubt about it. We hope that we are good people. We hope to be obedient to what God desires for the way we live our lives, but it's not dependent on about how we live. And we see this when Jesus, we talked about last week with Easter, the crucifixion, the resurrection, but when he's on the cross and the thief says next to him, forgive them for the, or he says, he basically attests to Jesus' deity there, and Jesus says, today you'll be with me in paradise, right? This guy literally did nothing other than to express belief in Jesus' deity, and Jesus assured him salvation on that day. There was no works involved there. This is where Jesus' claim is so unique. It's based wholly on Jesus' work on the cross, on his perfect life and our profession of faith in him. And then after we make that profession of faith and believe, there's certainly an expectation, and Jesus makes that very clear also, that out of gratitude, out of the way that we experience God's salvation, we want to live morally, but that's not the reason we get in. It's wholly by grace that we're in. The reason I say this is because just a quick survey, we can see that they're making some very, very distinctly different claims about their faith. And when we go back to that question, can there only be one true religion? If two things are claiming vastly different perspectives, then how in the world can they both be right? This is not bantering which one is right or isn't right. I'm not trying to do that. I'm just trying to help you see you can't have two opposite opposing claims and say they're both right. And right now, it's easier, and quite frankly, this is why I talk about the heart part of this question, when we are afraid to say only one can be right, we're afraid of the implications that has on others that don't believe in the same way we believe is right. That's not easy, and I'm not pretending or professing to say it is easy. I'm just telling you this is a philosophical truth. If you have two different views, two differences, they can't both be right. Only one can be right or none can be right. That's your only possible conclusion. And that's ultimately the conclusion I want to make with you guys. And I'm not even going to go into why I believe Christianity is right. You heard a little bit about Agshin, how he came to that process. You heard a little bit last week as we talked about the resurrection. I believe in the resurrection. I believe in the true historical resurrection. And when you start believing in those claims, it makes all those other claims biblically, in my mind, real and true as well. And so we're not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. What I want you to hear this is we can't just be okay with saying they're all right. We have to come to this conclusion that either only one or none is right. And that's hard. I've heard this, and you've probably heard it too. It's a Hindu parable about this king, and blind men around an elephant, and they're feeling different parts, the trunk and the legs, and they say, oh, this is a tree, and this is a snake, and this is a, and they use it as a metaphor to say this is really the nature of religion, is it's all one kind of thing, and they all just see it differently. And the problem with a metaphor like that is it assumes great arrogance by the person saying that's the way, because it assumes this backup view like the king has, so he can see the blind adherents with their, just touching the individual parts of the elephant and believing that. And often when you hear this, it comes in a maybe an academic or sometimes even an atheistic environment where they're saying, oh, silly peasants, silly blind people, they don't know what they're doing, it's all one. That is a bold philosophical claim, because what makes you think you can do that, and I would go one step farther to say, is you can't bring some of these opposing views in these individual religions and make them one. You can't turn them into a whole functional elephant. It just doesn't work. You can't have reincarnation and one distinct life and death and physical heavenly body afterwards. It doesn't actually make sense. And so that's kind of the conclusion I want to draw with you. But again, we're not able to really spend the time that I'd like to talk about why I believe personally. I hope you assume it, because we're a church here and we believe in Jesus, why I believe Christianity is right. We don't have the time. This series is really going to be built around talking about those parts of our faith, and as we tackle some of these harder questions. What I do want to do is spend some time talking more about that emotional reaction, the heart part of this question. Because really what you get down to is that torment of exclusivity. Exclusivity is like a bad word anymore, and probably rightfully so. We, as Converge community, have 4 distinct values, and one of them is to include, right? That's hard. How do you bring that together, these exclusive claims in the spirit of inclusion? How do you actually do that? And that's the part that I want to hit at today. And this is part of that heart or emotional reaction, because most of us, when we go into this and we start feeling like, oh man, this feels way too exclusive, I don't really like how that feels. We're feeling the weight of the implications of our friends or family members who don't believe the same way we believe, and we worry about that, and we don't want them to feel bad about that, and that is good. I honestly believe that's a good reaction. But we can't ignore also that we are a Christian community, and we don't set the rules. We didn't make the claims. But as we saw in John 14, Jesus, our leader, made those claims. So we don't really get to debate what we believe is right or wrong. Ultimately, he says this is the way it is, and we just have to somehow jump on board and be okay with that. But what I want to show you is that Jesus, how he handled this exclusive claim. And I love how he actually handled this exclusive claim, because what you see in Jesus is that he was making, as we heard, this exclusive claim, but going and including in a way that nobody had ever seen before in the Jewish faith. He was a Jew, a practicing Jew. They called him teacher. They called him rabbi. He taught at the temple. This is what Jesus was all about. And typically, you kind of kept with your own, especially as a minority, especially not just as a ethnic minority, but a religious minority. You stuck with your own. But we see Jesus doing something really different. Jesus starts going and hanging out with people that kind of got him in trouble, like these thieving tax collectors, these people that would exploit the taxation system for their gain and kind of play puppet to the Roman government. These were Jewish people that they see as sellouts. He went and started hanging out with lepers and the unclean, which you wouldn't do. You see him in several instances having these side, deep, meaningful conversations with women which had virtually no status in this culture. And he just goes on and on. He's healing people. He's loving people. And what you see is, yes, his claims may have been exclusive, but he was probably the most inclusive guy in that town. He loved people. And he didn't see this as an exclusive truth to be lorded over people. He saw this as an exclusive truth to have an opportunity for people to experience what they would call the gospel, the good news. He believed this good news was an opportunity, and it wasn't an opportunity for exploitation, but an opportunity for joy and healing and freedom. This is why it was easy for him to talk about an exclusive truth in the same way. And what I want us to understand is that disagreement does not equal hate or bigotry. Actually, I love the fact that I've made so many friends along the way that think so differently than I do, and we became and stayed good friends. This is important because right now it's not in any one camp. It's across our entire country. There's this extreme polarization that's happening. You get in, or we're kicking you out of the group, right? It's this true call to assimilating into one idea or one belief and not leaving space for people to just embrace and enjoy their own beliefs that they've gained in their own work, in their own research, in their own effort to try to come to those convictions. Instead, it says, if you don't agree, you're out. I don't agree with that, and I don't think the Christian gospel says that's who we should be either. In fact, there was many times where people would come to Jesus and say, what do I have to do? The rich young ruler, what do I have to do? And he says, well, you could give away your things and follow me. And he just walked away. He wouldn't do it. Jesus didn't call names at him. He didn't yell at him. He just let him walk. He wasn't trying to be mean or oppressive. He gave him an opportunity, and he didn't take it. And this is the difference is when we start using what we believe to be truth as an opportunity to exploit people, that is bigotry. That is hate, and that is not okay. That is not allowed. And many, many churches and seasons of Christianity have done that. And for that, I can't really apologize for them, but I'm just going to say I apologize for those exploitations. That was never the heart or the intention of Jesus. Instead, what Jesus wanted is to share this opportunity for good news and allow people to come and experience, allow people to have those conversations, allow people to journey, search, and wrestle and to come to those conclusions. And they only can do that if they build strong relationships. This is why relationships is at the core of our mission here. Because we don't assume that everybody's going to think the same way. Actually, the mark to me of a really solid church here is that we have extreme diversity in all kinds of different views. Obviously, there's a commonality among Jesus as a Lord if we're a professing Christian church, but within that, there's all kinds of opportunity for different ways of thinking, whether it's political or some theological kind of nuances. That's okay. And we get better when we're able to have those conversations in healthy ways and when we're actually able to disagree and love each other well. And I've experienced this with people even outside of the faith. One of my very best friends throughout college, his name was Serkan. He was from Turkey. He was a devout practicing Muslim. We lived together for 2 years. And he and I were incredibly good friends. We had incredibly good faith conversations. And there was maybe a hope in my heart, because I believe it's true, that he would come to faith in Jesus, just like he probably, because he believed Islam was true, hoped I would come to faith in the Muslim way. But we didn't have to enjoy a good friendship. We didn't have to grow in our compassion and understanding for humanity. We just did that because we loved each other. And I do that, and I believe you should do that, because if you believe in cosmology that comes from Christian, or from the one supreme God, this Jewish Christian mindset, you also believe he created every person and deserves honor and respect and dignity, and so you should treat him that way. And ultimately, this is where the harm has been done by the church and probably many other religions, where we say, we're right, you're wrong, and I'm going to hurt you, I'm going to oppress you, I'm going to hold this over you for that. And here's the deal. If we actually want people to experience what we believe, hopefully you believe, is good news, it will never work if you exploit or oppress people and say, now you have to. It'll just never work. This is why the Jesus movement exploded in the first 200 years. People always say Constantine, Constantine, Constantine. Well, that Constantine didn't come around for about 300 years. But it was still exploding. It exploded because they loved people well, because they gave them an opportunity to experience what they believed to be truth in the good news and cared for people. And that's what I want our story to be as well, is that we're not using this as an opportunity for hate or bigotry or superiority thinking. We're using this as an opportunity for others to experience what we've experienced, what we believe is the good news. So I'm going to kind of wrap this up here, but we believe that we're equipped to do this by God. Don't forget that. We believe that the Holy Spirit is in us if you're a follower of Jesus. So this is what I'm asking you to do. And if you're watching, if you're here and you're just kind of exploring, this is also what I want you to do. And because remember, there's two major parts there. There's the work of figuring out answers to this. And I want you to do that and do the hard head work. But then there's the hard heart work of loving people really well. And so I'm going to break it down kind of into 4 simple steps here. And that first one is just to start investigating. This is what this series is all about. Start investigating what you believe the truth is. Start investigating for the sake of certainty, for the sake of conviction. Make sure that you're confident with what you believe, because if you're not, that becomes troublesome. If you can't with conviction say, I believe this and this is why, it doesn't necessarily, if you're a Christian and you're saying, I believe this, I'm not sure why, it doesn't mean that you're not a Christian anymore. It means that your faith isn't on a strong footing, just like we talked about last week. And so it's important that you go pursue this. You go investigate. You go figure this out. Just like if you're just investigating Christianity, you wouldn't call yourself a Jesus follower. It's important you figure out what you believe so you can, with conviction, say, this is what I believe and this is why, so that the implications of that don't creep up on you. Don't ignore this for your whole life. And at the end of the life, wonder, why the heck didn't I take this seriously? Because it does matter. The next thing I want you to do is ask questions. I am the worst at this. I love to talk. If you know me well, you know I love to talk. Get to know people and ask them questions. Get to know about what they believe. Get to know what makes them tick. And I'm not saying just go and experience your little safe bubble. I'm saying get to know a diversity of people. Get to understand what makes them tick, what their background is. Really explore through relationships. It's a good opportunity. Third, give respect. People deserve respect and dignity. Even if you don't agree with them, they deserve it. And you need to give it to them. And we can't continue to propagate and I'm talking to the church here, we can't continue to propagate these bigot kind of caricatures of Christianity because we're unwilling to have real conversations and be respectful and understand that these people made claims this faith on a conviction from their investigation. Don't be a jerk. Go get to know what they're all about. Have respect. Be respectful for them. And the fourth thing is be like Jesus. And I'm saying this to everybody in the world because what we see is Jesus handle people in the way we'd all want to handle them. There's a lot of not a lot of confusion. There's a lot of differing views on who Jesus is, right? As Akshin said, prophet, teacher, whatever. There is no dispute about his character. Across the board, historically, people believe in the character of Jesus. So that's why I say, no matter who you are, no matter where you're at in your faith journey, be like Jesus. Be a person that wants to bring good news and restoration and healing and love and care to the people you're around. Have conversations with them. Take the time to figure out what goes. You think about the woman at the well. You think about when he goes and heals this other woman, when he's supposed to be on a way to heal somebody else, he stops and takes the time for the conversation. Be like Jesus. So that's where that leaves us today. And so I want to kind of give this last charge to you guys is, again, if you're a Jesus follower, if you profess to be, make sure you're digging into this. We have this book, Reason for God. There's one out there. It's free for everybody to take. You don't have to give it back. We're not going to finish this whole thing. We're going to go through the first half of the book over the series. The second half's your own project. And make sure you're digging into this. Make sure you feel like you have conviction and can answer strongly these. It doesn't need to be a perfect answer. You just need to have some conviction. And of course, most of all, if you consider yourself a Jesus follower, make sure you're treating people well. That's my big heart, and that's my heart for this whole series. This is not a series to point fingers and try to show everybody why we're superior. That is not even my heart. That's not my intention. My desire for this series is that we figure out how to love people well and be like Jesus, create opportunities for them to maybe ask us questions and be interested in what it is that we profess to believe. And maybe you've, on the other side of this, if you're a Jesus follower, you've just kind of never really thought about the implications of, can there be one true religion? And you said, everybody's probably all right. And maybe they will. We don't know the mind of God, right? But we have a pretty good sense of what it is based on what we believe to be true in Scripture. And if you're just letting yourself go there, I say hit the brakes on that, pump the brakes, and realize that there may be some significant implications. And I want that to stir some fervor in you to go and start having conversations with people, respectful, loving conversations with people, to help them at the very least hear what you believe is to be an opportunity in following Jesus. And if you consider yourself, just in the journey, unchurched, not part of Christianity, I just wanted to ask you the question, does this ring true? Does this make sense? Do you buy into this thesis of there can only be one or none? And if you do, dig in. Figure out, what do you believe? I didn't spend the time espousing Christianity here. Just what do you believe and why? Dig in. If you don't even believe in that premise, I want you to dig in a little bit more. This is for everybody. Alvin Plantinga, great philosopher. This is a good one. Just Google Alvin Plantinga. If you don't remember, if you're watching on Facebook, type that in. Whoever's doing it, Alvin Plantinga. This is a good one. It has a lot of interviews that help you just understand philosophically some of these issues. Dig in there, for example. Read that book. There's some other great books I can recommend too. But ultimately, I want to push you, if you don't consider yourself a Jesus follower, just to investigate. Figure this out. Don't just sit by and hope it all works itself out. Because what if what we believe is true, and we believe it is, and there's some significant implications to that. So, anyways, there's more than I can talk about at this. Again, read this book. I don't even know how long it's been, probably too long in your mind, but I've been trying to boil these things down. Literally, I'll have 60, 70 minutes of content, try to get it down to 25 or 30 minutes. I can't possibly give you every kind of answer to every kind of possible thought you might have. So if you have some of those, come and talk to me, and I'd love to talk. Come and talk to Agshin. He'd love to talk to you, and we'll go from there. So let me pray, and then the band's going to come up and lead us in a couple songs here to wrap it up. God, thank you for this time together. Thank you for the opportunity to dig into tough questions. Thank you for just giving us brains that we can use, and giving us logic that we can wrestle through it, and we can go in genuinely seeking truth. And we believe, Lord, that you will bring us and bring everybody to it, Lord. So I just pray that prayer. That I pray that for whoever's here, whoever's watching, whoever's listening, God, that you lead them to truth. You guide them towards moving past just settling on it doesn't really matter, and move them towards a part of the journey where they realize there's real implications in not making a decision as well. God, we thank you again. We pray that you give us a great night of worship here as we sing. And God, we also pray as we go into this week, Lord, that you would bless the conversations and the relationships in and around us, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.